32, dead last in the first
32.
round.
Okay. So that combine hurt him. He dropped because of that.
Yeah, it was his pro day mainly. He didn't throw well his pro day, and he didn't show a lot of deep ball accuracy, and that actually kind of showed up early in this season. But hindsight being what it is, Teddy Bridgewater should have been rated number one, should have went number one. He showed a lot as a rookie quarterback. So it can work both ways. You're right, he was number one in the process early, fell. Saw the same thing with Matt Leinart. I think you're going to see the same thing with Marcus Mariota. It's just a matter of how far he falls. And sometimes the scouts are right, as they were with Leinart. Sometimes they're wrong, as they were with Bridgewater. And we'll see. I think my biggest issue with Mariota, and I don't think he belongs anywhere near the top one or two spots in the NFL draft, is the fact he is a system guy at this point. You have to run the spread read option for him to be successful out of the gates. You know, if you're going to play a pro set, he's going to need 2 or 3 years. So for a team like Philadelphia, it makes a ton of sense. For a team like Tampa Bay, they'd have to change their entire philosophy to fit Marcus Mariota in.
That's interesting. So basically, if Tampa Bay's in the one spot and somebody really says, we want Mariota and we're willing to do something, take the Eagles out of the equation, in general, anybody, you think they'd be willing to listen, because if people value Mariota that high, that would be a good deal for them then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt. The only question with Tampa Bay is the fact, and it'll be more of the off-the-field stuff, there's no question Jameis Winston belongs at that spot as far as a pure football prospect. He deserves, in any year, if you didn't have the off-the-field issues, barring an Andrew Luck year, he would be the number one draft choice. And if it was the Andrew Luck year, he would have been number two. I mean, he's that kind of NFL-ready quarterback, and just in the, as I said, the pure football sense. The off-the-field stuff is legitimate. You have to enter that in the equation, and we'll see if Tampa Bay is comfortable enough with it to take him number one. You got the same issue with Tennessee, though, in the fact that if they were to take a Marcus Mariota and say they're not sold on Zach Mettenberger, they have to change their whole philosophy, and that's a big question mark for a team like that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you bring up, John, is the Winston factor here, that some people just feel that he is a flat-out better player than Mariota, but if he doesn't have the off-the-field stuff, that it's not even a conversation that we're having. It would be Winston as the top guy.
Yeah, it really would. It wouldn't be a conversation. It really wouldn't. And that's not a criticism towards Marcus Mariota. Again, we're projecting to the next level. He's a tremendous college player. You saw it with Tim Tebow, one of the best college players of all time. That doesn't necessarily translate to the next level. So I think a lot of people look at when people like me say that and think we're picking on the kid. We're not picking on the kid. It's just the reality of the situation. And you see in the NFL, you have to throw from the pocket, and he's not very accurate downfield. When they get behind the chains at Oregon, which is not often, but you saw it a little bit against Ohio State, and you even saw a little bit against Florida State. When he did have to throw the ball downfield, he wasn't all that accurate, and that's going to be a big, big concern as scouts look at him and they go through this process.
You know, John McMullen's with us, the NFL editor, sportsnetwork.com. You know, John, there was an interesting tweet that we got from a listener who basically said, look, there's a lot of debate about Nick Foles, and say, look, why are you guys talking about Mariota? They don't need a quarterback. They got Nick Foles. And one of these messages from a listener said, look, yes, you have Foles, but it's like putting regular gas in a Ferrari. It can run for a little while, but eventually it's going to break down. You need to get your quarterback, if you're Chip Kelly, to the ideal quarterback. And, you know, one of the writers from the Oregonian out there wrote a piece today about Chip Kelly and how he needs to get Mariota. And he says, basically, Eagle fans are so conditioned by NFL benchmarks. They don't grasp what a quarterback ideally suited for Kelly's system would do. He says Foles is a stopgap. Do you agree that Foles needs, you know, that he's a stopgap kind of guy and that Kelly is yearning to find his ideal fit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any question he'd rather have a more mobile quarterback. I mean, he likes to run the spread offense. He likes to run a lot of read option if he had his druthers. And to do that at the highest level, you do need a more mobile guy than Nick Foles. So I do kind of agree with that aspect of it, but there are other issues. I mean, if the Eagles see themselves as true contenders, and we'll see if they do moving forward, it's probably better to have a veteran quarterback than a rookie, certainly if you consider your window to be small. So you have to add that into it. And the second part is Nick Foles is obviously as a third-round pick, has a very cap-friendly deal. He's still on his rookie contract for one more year. So you're going to see that happen with Seattle. We all talk about the Seahawks. They're in their second, straight NFC championship game, favorite to go to the Super Bowl again. One of the reasons they're as talented as they are is because they hit on a quarterback in the third round. And what does that mean? They haven't had to allocate a significant portion of their salary cap towards the quarterback position. That's all going to change now. They're going to have to pay Russell Wilson maybe $22 million a year. And watch, as soon as that happens, the back end of that roster is going to get hit. The depth is going to be first. You're going to start having to answer questions. Can you move on with Marshawn Lynch? And soon, some of the players that make them as good as they are you're going to have to make difficult decisions and move on. So I think the Eagles should embrace what they have right now, and the fact that Nick Foles is a cheap option, and try to build up around it and try to do it that way. Because even best case scenario, if Mariota falls to 10, say, and the Eagles are able to move up and get him, I still think it's probably the second, third year before he's truly hitting on all cylinders in the NFL.
Well, that's an interesting point, because this is a team that's 10-6 back-to-back years. If you draft a rookie quarterback and put him into your starting lineup, are you taking a step backwards?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. I mean, you see it. I think Teddy Bridgewater did a tremendous job as a rookie quarterback in the NFL this year. And look at Minnesota. They're an average to below average team. Now, a lot of that had to do with the fact that Adrian Peterson wasn't there. We all understand that. But all rookie quarterbacks, even Andrew Luck, and that's your top tier. That's probably the best quarterback prospect, coming out since Peyton Manning. So that's where you rate everyone, and you sort of go down from there. Maybe if you have a once-in-a-generation guy like Luck, you can make the playoffs. But every rookie quarterback has hiccups. Just look around. It happens everywhere.
John, obviously, there's going to be this conversation because of the relationship that those two guys had, Mariota and Chip Kelly. But ultimately, do you think that quarterback is their biggest issue? I mean, is that something that they must upgrade, or is it something that they can get by with without, investing that much money? And it sounds like you think, hey, look, you're okay with Foles, just keep on going, invest in other areas. But you look at the teams that are still left, and they all got guys that are pretty darn good.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I think that's, the reality of picking a 20. I mean, to me, the question is, do you want to give up, part of your future to move up to get a guy who's a big question mark in my mind? And he does fit, as I said. He fits with Philadelphia better than anyone else. So I think if there's one team that should do it, it would be the Eagles. But I think you have to think about it long term. And the fact that Nick Foles has won a lot of games and his winning percentage has been pretty impressive. And I understand he's not that top tier. He's not Andrew Luck. He's not going to be Tom Brady. He's not going to be Peyton Manning in his prime. But there are other ways you can win the game. Can he be a game manager? Can he do what Russell Wilson does in Seattle? Well, maybe if you build up everyone around him to the level the Seahawks have done, I think that part is a possibility.
John, let's look at these games, and you just mentioned the Seahawks. They got Russell Wilson, a guy they got in the third round. I mean, you mentioned they kind of got lucky. You get a guy in the third round, you don't have to pay him all that much. That's helped everything around. But obviously, he's got a chance to win his second Super Bowl in a row, and his first 3 years in the league, he could win 2 Super Bowls. Pretty unprecedented. Right now, for your money, are the Seahawks the favorites of the 4 teams left?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. They're the best team in football. You know, Ric Flair rules: to be the man, you got to beat the man, and they've been so dominant in Seattle, 25-2. You mentioned Russell Wilson. No quarterback in the history of this game has ever won more than he has in his first 3 years. So that's the kind of level they're playing at. And you know, I would give Green Bay a chance simply because Aaron Rodgers is the most impactful player in football. He was named the MVP by the Pro Football Writers yesterday. He's going to be named the AP MVP before the Super Bowl. I don't think there's any question about that. But he's not healthy. And if the Aaron Rodgers who played against the Dallas Cowboys is there against Seattle, it's not going to work. He's got to show. He's got to have at least a little more functional football mobility to deal with that Seahawks defense, which is a big, big upgrade over what he faced against Dallas.
It's amazing. You go back to the opening night that basically landed them home field advantage. Seattle beat Green Bay. Do you think that they will do it a second time?
Yeah, I do, and I, you know, as I said, I think it would be much tougher if Rodgers was 100% and able to move around, but he's not. I think they'll have a better game plan. That was, you know, a rare off night for Mike McCarthy. That if you think back to that opening night where they didn't even look at Richard Sherman, never mind throw the football at him. So they basically took half the football field away from themselves. And we all know how good Richard Sherman is, but the Packers have to understand they have some pretty good receivers, and you can't just ignore one side of the football field. So I think they'll come in with a better plan. I think they'll give a better accounting for themselves. But it's just not a good matchup for them.
AFC side, John, Indianapolis with an upset last week. With Luck obviously going against Brady, has not been successful in these games. What changes your mind on this one, if any, to make us feel like Indianapolis can pull off an upset here?
Well, you hate to go chalk, but it's going to be very difficult for them. I mean, if you talk about the three toughest places to play in football, it's probably CenturyLink Field, it's probably Lambeau, and it's probably Foxborough. So you have Seattle and New England, and they're playing at home for a reason because they're so difficult to beat there. And when you talk about playoff tested, there's no team in the history of this game that's been more playoff tested than the Belichick-Brady Patriots. This will be, I think, their ninth AFC championship game together. If they win it, they'll be going to their eighth Super Bowl as a franchise, which will tie the all-time record. I mean, nobody knows how to play in big games better than the Patriots. I think it's a little bit too much to expect Andrew Luck to overcome that at this stage of his development. I think in 2 or 3 years when we're talking, I think this league will be Andrew Luck's. I think the Colts are going to win multiple Super Bowl titles, but I think it's a little too early to expect it out of him this time around.
I agreed with that. I think Luck and Wilson right now, those two guys might be the best two young guys going. All right, John, let's get your thoughts on a couple of the coaching moves here. Rex Ryan in Buffalo, kind of a head-scratcher, or do you like it?
Head scratcher only for the reason, you look at the Bills team, and they had a very good defense last year under Jim Schwartz, fourth in the league, first in sacks, the dominant defense, and they need to fix that offense, especially with Kyle Orton, moseying off into retirement. Now they have to try to salvage E.J. Manuel, and, it's almost an exact duplicate of what Rex was going through in New York with certainly an above-average defense and no quarterback. And now the defensive-minded guy is going into the same situation. Now, he brought in Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator, but his reputation took a bit of a hit this year because Colin Kaepernick took a big step back. So it's a bit of a head-scratcher to me. It didn't make a lot of sense unless you talk about the cachet aspect of it, because Rex can certainly sell tickets.
Yeah, this year wasn't a lot of great candidates out there, and Rex might have been the biggest name. How about Todd Bowles taking his spot in New York? It seems like they did the same thing. They had a defensive-minded guy. They brought in another defensive-minded guy.
Yeah, same thing. Usually when you move on from a defensive guy, just the cyclical nature of things, you usually want to go offense. And if you move on for an offensive guy, you usually want to go defense. In both these cases, didn't work out that way. And Todd Bowles, I think he deserved to get a head coaching job. I think he's ready. I think he's one of the better candidates that were out there. I think he did a tremendous job with Arizona with all the injuries this year. And I think he'll end up as a really good choice for the Jets. But as the team is structured now, it doesn't make much sense. So I think it's going to take a while because they're going to have to revamp and obviously find their quarterback. And I think that, by the way, getting back to Mariota, that might be the team you have the most difficulty getting over, because if Mariota starts to slip, I think the Jets at 6 would be very difficult to get by.
Well, let's spin this. Let's spin this then, John. If they take Mariota there, what happens with Geno Smith? Does he become available, and is he a guy that a guy maybe like Chip Kelly would be interested in because of his skill set?
Well, yeah, you would think that. I mean, people think of Geno as and he's got mobility, but he's more of a pocket passer. He's never been a read option guy. So I don't know, and the fact that he's really slow as far as his decision making goes. So I don't think he's as good as a fit as you would see, and we'll see. The Jets could still, Chan Gailey's going to be the new offensive coordinator. The one thing about all coaches is they all have egos, and he might walk in there and say, I can fix this guy.
Right. Doug Marrone, John Fox, two guys who are coming off winning seasons but are free agents. Do they coach in 2015?
Well, I saw one report that has the Bears closing in on hiring John Fox, which would be a surprise to me, only because that's not generally the MO of the McCaskies. The Bears have always, kind of been cheap as far as the head coaching position goes. Actually have never hired a head coach with previous head coaching experience. So that would be a big shift in MO for that organization, and I'll believe it when I see it. I don't think Doug Marrone, I think his reputation took a huge hit after some of the news broke about how the divorce went down in Buffalo. Jimmy Sexton deserves a ton of credit for negotiating that contract, but Doug Marrone was not a very popular man in the organization.
Well, so many stories. And by the way, Jack Del Rio with Oakland. We still have Atlanta. We've got Denver. We've got Chicago still looking for head coaches, so that's not done yet as well. There's a lot to get to in the NFL season before the Super Bowl even gets here, and then free agency on March the 10th. And, John, hopefully we'll be chatting throughout this process. I think this offseason is already off to an interesting start. It hasn't even really begun yet.
Yeah, and interesting, the NFL just added a free agent combine today. So they're going to have a free agent combine in March. This league knows how to keep the information flowing.
That's awesome. All right, John. John McMullen, everybody. SportsNetwork.com for information on all of the games this weekend. Thanks, John.
Thanks for having me, Mike.